portion of this session. So I'll begin with, each day there are approximately 30 million presentations worldwide going on each day. 30 million presentations going on worldwide. At this moment, there may be as many as 1 million presentations going on. Office buildings, universities. At least 50% of them are completely unbearable. And you've been in them, right? Amen. Okay, what do you not like about presentations?
Reading from the slides.
Reading from the slides. What else do you not like?
Lack of interactivity.
Okay, lack of interactivity?
Way too much information on slides.
Way too much information on slides. Anything else? What do you not like about certain presenters or speakers?
Monotone.
Very good.
Speak too fast.
Too fast? Okay.
They don't know how to incorporate the visual aid properly.
Okay, good. They don't know how to incorporate visual aid, how they speak, whether it's boring. The number one question any audience is going to ask, you're asking this now, sitting in this session, as you were in the session before this, I'm sure, what's in it for me? In any presentation, no matter if it's informative or persuasive, the number one question that you as a presenter have to answer is, what's in it for my audience? You have to make them feel like it's important and it's interesting for them. So we're going to have 3 different portions of this program or seminar. The first one is how to prepare effectively. The second is how to practice. And the third is the presentation itself. Because I know that you're all getting ready to have to do a presentation in a couple of weeks. Is that correct?
10 weeks.
10 weeks. Oh,
Feels
wow.
like a couple of weeks.
Feels like a couple of weeks. Been in this program. My husband is in the EMBA program right now, and they're always having to do presentations. And it can be stressful. Are any of you anxious about public speaking? Standing up in front of a group. Anybody?
Only if I don't know my stuff.
Yes.
Only what?
If I don't know my stuff.
Okay, only, right, if you're not prepared, that makes you a little more anxious. Yes, exactly. A lot of people do have public speaking anxiety, and especially if you're being interviewed, if there's some type of media, you feel like, yeah, I've only got a very small window of time. How am I going to make that where I come across as professional and competent as possible? I have the information that really matters in that very small window of time. If you ever do any type of media, and George and I were talking about this a little earlier, if you ever talk to people about media presentations or you are interviewed, you know that it's, of course, the flubs, what you accidentally said or mispronounced, that they'll keep that. So you have to practice to be able to be a little less anxious in a situation. So, as I said, first we're going to cover how do you prepare? How do you prepare for a presentation effectively? Organizing, getting the material together, answering the right questions. Secondly, we're going to look at how do you practice the presentation effectively, and then the presentation itself, which will include where you stand. We talked about nonverbal communication earlier, where you stand, how you present, how do you field questions, how do you prepare for questions, all of those. So we'll begin with looking at a great kind of synopsis of what we're going to cover. Conservative estimate. Yeah. Okay, we're going to stop it there, and then we're going to cover what we said we're going to cover first, which is understanding asking the questions. How do you prepare? How do you prepare for a presentation? How long is the presentation that you're going to be giving in 10 weeks?
40 minutes.
40? That is a long time.
Very long.
With 20 minutes of question and answer after.
Wow.
Three
Okay.
people, four people, 40 minutes, and then 20 minutes of question and answer.
Think of all the opportunity we have to put people to sleep.
That's horrible. And did you know that you can lose someone's attention in 9 seconds? It takes 9 seconds to lose somebody, to lose an audience. So what does that mean? What does that mean? As they said in the first part of that clip, how do you recognize what's really important? And that you as a team can be passionate about that information that you're giving the audience, and how can you answer the question up front, what's in it for them? Why should they listen? And we're going to talk about structure a little later, and you're going to do an exercise where you're going to create an introduction that is going to hook the audience, link it to your topic, and then preview the statements of what you're going to be covering so that they can follow you along in that presentation. But the first thing that you have to do, now you have your handouts, and the first thing that you're going to do in any situation is begin with that. You all do it all the time. You teach it. The who, what, where, when, why, and how. What are we presenting? What are we presenting? What's important about it? Do you need to tell them absolutely everything? What is the presentation about?
Whatever our topic is that we have a policy question about.
Oh, joy. That sounds so interesting. Okay. But you do have to think, how can I make it interesting?
That's right.
What about that topic that could put everybody to sleep can I talk about or discuss that answers the question, why is it important for you to listen to? And how is it significant? So you ask the questions. Number one, who am I presenting to? Who's my audience? Is my audience another audience of academics? Is it people outside of academics? Are they leaders? Are they students? Because who you're presenting to has everything to do with how you present the information and the points that you feel are relevant in conveying to the audience. So, the questions: who, what, where, when, why? Why am I even doing this? Why is it important? And how. The how comes later. After you've created the structure and the organization, then you have to think about how am I going to present it in the most effective way. Am I going to use a PowerPoint? Am I going to have handouts? My handouts, cardinal rule with me, are never PowerPoint slides. That's just, you're just telling the audience they could have gone home and you'd have sent it to them. So, but how are you going to present that information? After you've asked these questions, then you have to think about, okay, what is my purpose? Is it to inform or is it to persuade? What are the differences? Does anybody know what the differences are? If you're informing an audience about a topic, or if you're trying to persuade the audience.
You persuade, you try to change the way they think or behave.
Because they probably already know something about it.
Okay, good. So you're trying to change the way they think or behave. You're going to call them to action. You want them to buy into something or change their attitude or somehow get behind the cause and actually take that next step. The other one was they probably already know about that topic. You're not informing them, you're persuading them.
Whereas an informative, they may or may not know.
Right. In an informative, the thing that you have to think about is, here's my topic that I'm going to present on. How much of that topic is general knowledge? Because you don't want to bore the audience. So in an informative presentation, you want to extend the common knowledge.
Let me ask a question,
Yes.
only because I see what we're gonna have to do as being both.
So we have to
Because it's a
present,
policy
yeah.
paper, so there's going to be information about an issue.
Okay.
And then we are going to present ways to solve that and show what should be the strongest points and how to do that.
Okay, good.
Right, everybody? Isn't that our point? So, I mean, I see it as being kind
They're
of,
not mutually exclusive. It's-
I was gonna
you can't
say,
that,
particularly in
okay,
this instance, I
especially
think
persuasive speech.
there's going to have to be, but then we have to sell our point on how to solve it.
Okay,
So-
all right, but let's take it in the different portions of that presentation. So in the first portion of the presentation, you are going to inform, so how are you going to inform them? You don't want to bore people with knowledge that they may already know. So get to the, what is that extension of the common knowledge? Why is this different? How is it different? What's new information? Because that's going to help hold their attention more than kind of giving them a definition and explanation in the background and all of that they may already know. Especially if you're all doing something that is similar in presentations, whether it is or not, but you have to think about what is our common knowledge in this group. Then the second portion, which is persuasive, is how am I going to persuade them on that? So then you're looking at organizing that portion of your presentation in a problem, cause, solution, or a cause-effect solution, where you're saying, okay, what is the problem? Let's define it. Because remember, in the last presentation, we have to create shared meaning. Everybody has to be on the same page as far as the problem itself. So a lot of times, people assume that everyone knows what the problem is, and they skip over that section. And then when you're talking about the effects of that problem, or the causes of that problem, then you're confusing people. Does that make sense? So when you get to that portion, you want to either have a problem, cause, solution, or a cause, effect, solution, organizational pattern. And that helps you to structure that information too, when you get to that portion of it. First main point being the problem, second, the cause or the effect, and third, what are your proposed solutions? And the most important portion of that main point of the solutions is you can talk about what seems like might be plausible solutions, but why your solution is better.
That's what we have to do, is we have
Okay.
to suggest several options and
Very
pick
good.
one that's the best.
Why is it the best?
Right.
And then what you do is you end with a call to action. So because I've given you this proposed solution and I've told you why it's the best solution and how it's going to work, what it would visualize it, what it's going to look like, what it's going to mean to you in the end if we go down this path, what do I want you to do with that information? So always on a persuasive, at the end of a persuasive presentation, the last thing that you need to end with, we're going to talk about introductions and conclusions and the structure of those in a minute, but the last thing that you want to end with in a persuasive presentation is a call to action. That's your closing statement. So now, it's passing the baton. You're in a relay race, and you've kind of run the first leg of the problem, the cause, you get to that solution, you've run that last leg. Now what you have to do is pass the baton to your audience. So you have to actually give them an action step to take, so that when they leave, I mean, that's how you kind of end with impact. Okay. All right, so what is our purpose? Right, to inform, to persuade. The third purpose of presentations is typically to entertain. And you might want to build some of that in there so that you're keeping the audience engaged and their attention as well. Now, let's look at who our audience is. We talked about that. Who are they? Why should they care? What are the points that I can make to them that are going to create that audience identification? And you need to do that along the way, because if you're talking about something that's kind of a, I hate to say, possibly a dry topic, policy, you need to kind of weave into that presentation along the way audience identification. Identify with your audience. Why is this important to us again? Because of this. How is this going to matter to you in the long run? Because of this. Identify with the audience so that they're engaged and you're continuing to remind them why it's important and significant. Because in identifying with your audience and audience analysis, that helps you with strategy. You're strategizing, understanding how the information is going to play to them in a way that is going to be most effective. Okay, now we get to you've all written 50,000 papers, you know how to organize things, organization. But what's different in a presentation is that in your introduction and your conclusion, there are steps that you need to take to gain the audience's attention and make them willing to ride along with you for that 45 minutes. Wow, okay. So, the first thing is, you know that you're going to go straight to that structure. What are our main points? How are we going to structure the informative portion of it and the persuasive? You're going to build the body first. Then, after you've built the body and you know kind of the basic outline of the presentation, then you're going to employ some creative tactics. You're going to be creative. Now you're going to create your introduction. So you never get up, and you see this all the time, you never get up at the beginning of a presentation and say, today we're presenting on X. I'm Alexa Chilcutt. That's just terrible. And then launch into the presentation. You have to have an introduction that hooks them. So the first thing in an introduction is an attention-getting device. If you watch preachers that are effective, or Tony Robbins, or any of those speakers, or even a politician, the effective ones begin with some kind of attention-getting device. What are they? A shocking fact or statistic. That's one type of attention-getting device. That's huge because you're hooking the audience. Possibly a narrative. Think about news stories. News stories begin when we looked at the anniversary of Katrina. How did all of those 60-minute news stories or CNN begin? So-and-so was displaced 10 years ago. Now they're, and they kind of weave this story at the beginning to create that emotional interest in the story. Because in an introduction, you have to have three things. Ethos, which is credibility. We talked about nonverbal communication earlier, so how do you look, how do you hold yourself? What kind of information are you bringing that the audience can say, okay, this is a credible presenter? Credibility, which is ethos. Pathos, emotional appeal. See, how do you create that? And with policy, how are you going to create emotional appeal? I don't know. But one way is you could start with some type of narrative. What does it mean? And then the third is logos, which is logic. Can people follow you in a logical order so it makes sense to them? So, okay, we're back to the AGD, the attention-getting device. You can open with a narrative, a shocking fact or statistic, a quote, could be inspirational, something that kind of creates that emotional response as well. Humor, but you've got to be careful. Who's your audience? You could open with a joke. Some people are good at that, some people aren't. I would never try that. Would not go over well. Okay, so how can you open that, or a rhetorical question? A rhetorical question is a good way to open a speech or a presentation as well. Imagine this, or think about, it's not that you want the audience to necessarily respond verbally to you, but what you're doing is you're putting that question out there. Imagine if this were the case, and you're getting the audience automatically engaged because they're thinking about that. Okay, so that's the first one. Then what you do is you have to link, after that attention-getting device, I've gotten your attention, you're interested, I have to link that attention-getting device, the narrative or the shocking quote or statistic, to my topic. So today we're going to talk about, this is how this links to the topic at hand. Then we go into, I feel bad, because here I am telling George, and this is what you teach, George. Okay, then after you link to topic, you're going to give everybody, hey, this is what we're talking about, the thesis statement today, and then the preview statement. So first we're going to cover this, second we're going to cover that, and third we're going to cover this. That old axiom, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. People think that's redundant. but the reality is that it increases memory with your audience. So the more that you can do that, the more they're going to remember, and they're going to be able to follow you along the way so that they're engaged, and it decreases uncertainty. You like a pastor that gets up there on Sunday morning and says, our topic is this, and I have 3 main points, A, B, C. Because by the time they get to C, you're going, oh, whew, all right, we're almost near the end. You know, your stomach is growling and you're ready to go. But the audience likes to follow you along the way, so they know where you're going in the process of things. So that's your introduction. Then you go through, you transition to your main points. Through that, keep that audience engaged, logical order of organization. And then at the end, you create a conclusion. Once again, you're going to tell them what you've told them already. First, we talked about this. Second, we covered that. And finally, we looked at this, the solution. So that they can, okay, retrace what you said, helps to increase that memory once again. And then you have to close with some kind of attention-getting device. If it's informative, if you started with a quote, it'd be great to kind of bring it full circle and end with another quote. If you began with a shocking factor statistic, it may be great to wrap it up and end with a shocking factor statistic, because you're signaling to the audience, okay, this is the end. Because we all hate to be hanging. We've done it. It's at the end of a presentation and you go, so wrap it up at the end. If it's the persuasive that you're ending with, that's easy, because the attention-getting device is going to be that call to action. You can end again with this factor statistic and then call them to action at the end. Okay, any questions? And there are great organizational patterns, even with the informative. Kind of chronological, how did this begin, along with a timeline. You can look at compare and contrast, categorical, but have some type of pattern. How many main points should you have in your presentation? 3 is a magic number. 3 to 5, but never more than 5. People just are not going to follow you. But people always remember 3. You know, snap, crackle, pop. What other 3 things do you remember?
This is easy, 1, 2, 3.
Easy as 1, 2, 3.
Remember your ABCs.
All right, ABCs. Yeah.
That's dope.
Faith, hope, charity.
She said Larry Moore and Curly.
Larry, Moe, and Curly. All right, good. That's good. Any other 3s you can think of? The Trinity. So you get 3.
Live, laugh, laugh. Or
Wink and blink and a nod.
Yeah, live, laugh, love, right?
Live, laugh. Is it live, laugh, love? What is it?
Live, laugh, love? Yeah, I think so. So 3 has that kind of, it triggers something in our memory. So 3 is always a great. And tell, you know, it's a good order to have, and you can tell people, if you can think of something that they can remember. First, you know, as I started today, I said I've got 3 points. Prepare, practice, present. So that you know when I get to the present, you're thinking, okay, we're closing it up, we're wrapping it up. Right? But 5, no more than 5, because then you're just going to get lost. And make sure that you actually create, you write down, which is a step that we don't tend to do anymore, and we're all really bad at it now. We get in our group and we think, okay, we're going to organize our presentation, and you open up a blank PowerPoint. And people start building the presentation, not the information. So start with just a piece of paper and an outline of what you're going to present and the information and how it's going to work in. That presentation is going to be the very last thing that you do. Okay. Questions, comments, snap remarks? After we've organized, we're going to create. We're going to create. So, as I said earlier, that visual is a wonderful thing if you use it correctly. If If you want to have PowerPoint, if you want to have some types of links to videos that you can pull up, something that's interesting and brings people in, I don't know what kind of videos you're going to find on policy, but okay. Something that is going, the audience can watch and look at is wonderful. But you want to keep it as visual as possible. As simple as possible. If you have text on the slide, that's fine. But what are some rules that you've heard about PowerPoint?
Not too much text. I mean, it should be a point, an idea, but not all the information about the idea.
Yes.
Even though I break that regularly on all my classes, but.
Yeah, well,
Your
sure.
PowerPoint
But it's about the amount of time it takes to
Yeah.
take a note in some, sometimes it is information I want them to have, and then I'm just gonna talk about it.
Expound.
The PowerPoint should not have every word that's gonna come out of your mouth,
Yes.
because they don't, people can read, but you don't want them to read, you want them to,
To listen.
yeah,
You want them
they're
to be
support your
engaged.
ideas, not dominate your ideas.
So you can put the text on there, but it should be very brief. It should be a summation, take out extra words. You know, I love that old, whoever created PowerPoint, and then they had that 7x7 rule, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. That is the most outdated, asinine rule I've ever heard. Something like 7 words and 7 lines is the maximum, or something like that. It's terrible. As you saw in the presentation, bullets don't kill people, or something. People don't kill people, bullets
PowerPoint, yeah,
kill,
bullets
yeah,
kill.
PowerPoint bullets kill people. So when you create, you do want to make it visual. Put the big number, put the, you know, a word, and then talk around it, talk about it. And the thing to do in the preparation of the presentation and practicing that presentation is you want to make sure that you're not doing this and talking to your audience. And people do that all the time. They're looking at the PowerPoint, not the audience. So how are you going to create the handouts? I said the thing that you don't want to do is print off the slides and hand them to somebody. So what do you want to do in a handout?
I think more outline related
Okay.
type thing, and leave blanks, and, you know, because then you do engage it, kind of like what you did.
Like I did.
Yeah.
Go ahead, no.
Well,
Or if it's really content heavy, the presentation that you're giving, which your presentations may be, there can be extra information in the handout that you're not covering in PowerPoint, or resources listed in the handout that can bring, you know, take people to other, you know, places to look at this information or something, so you don't have to cover everything in the world. It can be supplemental as well. But you do want to keep them engaged somehow. So the handout should be a supplement and complement your presentation, not be the presentation. Okay. So, this is where we are. You've said it. You want to encourage active participation with your audience. You want to challenge them to think and participate, and you want to use some reinforcement, so you want to repeat the things that are important. Because remember when I talked about the audience listening? Effectively, you're only listening to about 50%. You're going to walk out the door with only 25%. How am I going to ensure that the 25% that I think is most important is the 25% that you walk out with? Say that 4 times?
Say it 4 times.
Yes, you say it about 4 times.
You say it 4 times.
Exactly. So you repeat it in some way. Effective speakers are great at this, especially motivational speakers, because they have some little phrase that they'll repeat throughout, and it sticks in the mind of the audience. So have some kind of repetition in there. What's going to be the most important points? All right, now we're on number 2. Aren't you glad? We've talked about preparing. Now we're going to practice, because practicing a presentation doesn't make it perfect, but it makes it better. Now, what are the benefits to practicing?
well, it really makes you more familiar with your material, and you
Yeah.
shouldn't have to refer back to looking at your slide and that sort of thing. I mean, and I think the more familiar, and obviously the more familiar you are with the material, then the more confident you are in presenting it. And even if you don't even, as some people are, don't even know really what you're talking about, other people don't have to know that if you put it across in such a way that you appear to know what you're talking about. I mean, that happens. She's all worried about that. She's all worried about that. And I said, but as long as you know your material and you can present it as if you know it, nobody will think you don't know all the background behind it. I mean, it's a game, I hate to
Also-
say that, but
Well,
it is.
it is. It's constructing that image. As well
Also, it
as,
helps you prepare for turmoil, like, things are gonna happen when you do a presentation, like, you're gonna hit the button and the
Wrong
PowerPoint
button.
slide is gonna go the wrong way.
right.
Or you're gonna forget to put something on there, or you're gonna have a video embedded and you forgot to put on a jump drive and you're like, okay, where's my video? So when you practice, these things will come up, you'll get used to it and you'll know how to handle those things when that time comes. So it just helps you to kind of do it, you know, not gonna be a perfect presentation, but more of a seamless presentation.
And when we talked about the thought speed, you know, your brain running 4 times faster than your mouth, the more you practice that information, the less you're going to have those verbal fillers. You know, in a typical group, and I'm sure you do this with your students as well, in a typical group, we would do an exercise that's and like you know, where I throw out a random topic, and the students, or, you know, I do a lot of training programs for the HR department at Alabama, and so, you know, you have staff in those programs, and they think it's just hilarious. But I'll throw them out, and it kind of freaks them out, but it's fun. You get them to stand up and speak for as long as they can without saying a verbal filler. And then when they do, everybody raises their hand and they have to sit down, and I give a prize to the person who lasts the longest. So, but the more you practice, the less you're going to have those verbal fillers in there. And the problem is, I have even been guilty of that. I did not know one time that I was going to be asked to get up and present something. So I came completely unprepared. And then someone said, Alexa, you know about that. Can I call you up here and you can talk about that for a couple of minutes? So I got up there, I said my thing, and I knew all about it. I mean, I had helped create it. I sat down and my husband said, oh my gosh, you said 30 times. And I had no idea, honestly, I had no idea that I had said I never knew that it came out of my mouth. But it was because my brain was so engaged in thinking about the next thing that I could say, it was putting in those were coming out as space fillers. And that's what it is. So the more you practice, the less you are capable or, you know, prone to do that. And it happens to everybody. So,
And it'll help us use
I've
that
done it.
time that we're all worried about how long it is. Because if you practice and you speak slowly, then it's really not as long as you think it is.
That's right.
You also learn how to time it when you actually do it for drill.
Nobody minds getting out a little early. Everybody really minds getting out late. So practicing does help you keep within that time limit, and it helps you know, okay, if this is half of our presentation once we've written it out, and we're practicing that, and it's already 30 minutes, then we're in trouble. Where do we cut? Where do we cut something and put that information in the handout and refer to it instead of just, you know, discuss it in the presentation? So time management is huge. Verbal fillers, eliminating that, feeling more comfortable with the information, deciding the logistics of it, like you were talking about, George, where who's going to be pulling up what, how can we make the transition seamless, how can we make the PowerPoint or the videos that we're going to show or whatever really work into it where it's not awkward. And how many of you are in a group presenting at a time?
4 or 5.
4?
3.
4 or 5?
3.
3, 4.
3? Oh, you got the lucky group.
There's a group with only 3?
Yeah.
And there's a group with
That's
5?
awesome.
Christie,
Sometimes
Just
she
lost
left,
somebody.
remember she went back to county.
they knew that we were capable of taking care of business.
We're good. You get 3 by Sunday.
All right. It's my personal pet peeve, I'm sorry, but I cannot stand for 5 people to be in a presentation and the 5 of them to be lined up at the front of the room. It's just, it's the picture we saw earlier of the Apple group, you know, all sitting on stools until it's their turn. Figure out some way, whether you have a spokesperson for each one or there's some kind of transition where maybe they're sitting kind of close to the edge and then coming, I don't know, but I just hate that because you feel awkward. When you're not the one presenting and you're standing up in front of everybody for 20 minutes, you feel awkward. So don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do it to the audience. Figure out some better way to do that. And everybody knows that you all worked on it. So even if one of you has a different type of supporting role, but you don't necessarily present, then I think that's
Is that an option?
Can we do that?
We'll talk about that in a minute.
I'm getting y'all off base. But do think of creative ways that don't just put everybody up there and staring at the audience for 20 minutes, because that's hard. That's hard. That's a hard thing to do. Okay, the other thing, practicing. I would encourage you all have phones at this point, or a camera. Not only practice the presentation, but videotape it, video record it. And watch it as the group and go, okay, if from the eyes of the audience, how bad is this? What do they need to do? So, you also see, you know, teaching public speaking, we record every single speech that the students do. And it's hard to get them to get on Integrity, so now we've had to make it an assignment where they have to get on Integrity and watch themselves and do a self-critique, because they don't want to see themselves. And it's amazing. Not only do they not want to see themselves, but then they hear themselves, and I tell them all the time, you all have a voice message on your cell phone, and you've all left the voice message and then played the playback and said to your friend, do I really sound like that? I really sound like that. Or you don't know that you're doing something awkward in the front of the room. I videoed myself, recorded myself teaching my large lecture class. I have 220 at a time. And as you know, I can't stand behind a podium. So in my class of 220, I'm doing this. Looking over here, asking questions, and then I'll go up the big stadium steps, and I'm looking at people because I don't want them to fall asleep. And then back around. I thought I was just being, engaging. And then I watched myself on the video, and I looked like a yo-yo. I mean, it was dizzying. And I thought, oh my gosh, okay, how am I still going to do the same thing, but in a way that's not going to be, really I was distracting. And I thought I was being engaging. So until you watch that, you don't know what you're doing. Yes, George.
The craziest thing this semester, this actually happened. This dude, every time he goes up to speak, he yawns right before he starts to talk. But it just, it's like one of those.
It's a nervous
Yeah,
thing.
nervous twitch. So he's up there, he's like, oh. The first time he did, like, he said, when I heard, like, I probably shouldn't be doing that. I probably shouldn't be yawning right now. So that was the first time, but the second time he did the same exact thing. He's like, I was like, wow. And I wrote, do not yawn.
But did he have to watch himself at any point?
No, I haven't let him see it yet.
Yeah, that's when they're just embarrassed. And I tell my teaching assistants too, you have a student come in and they're complaining about what you gave them on a speech, please bring them into your office and say, great, let's sit down and watch it together. They will not argue with you anymore. Because then they're embarrassed. They had no idea that they were doing all the things that you took off for. And it's one thing when they think that you're just being mean. It's another thing when they actually have to watch themselves.
I teach public speaking as well, and they're like, wow, I really probably should have got a D instead of a C on that after you sit down and watch them.
Yeah. What were you going to say?
It's beneficial to sit and watch it.
So I would suggest that to you all. Get somebody, even if they're not in your group, a spouse or something, or set it up, video record yourself, watch it as a group, figure out what you need to do differently. I think that's going to be a huge, huge thing. So in the practicing, that is going to be the point, yes, especially with time management as well. Leaving enough time for those questions at the end. We don't have to do this, because we kind of already know that. We talked about it in the last one, with the nonverbals. But you do want to make sure that you're looking as distraction-free, as competent as possible for that credibility as well. All right. What we're going to do before we talk about the end, which is the presenting itself, I want you to get in a group of maybe just two of you, because I think 3 would almost be too difficult. But I want you to create, does everybody have their topic, have their policy? Mm-hmm. Okay, all I want you to do is to create an attention getter of some type, even if you have to kind of make it up. An attention getter, a link to topic, and a preview statement. An attention getter, a link to topic, and a preview statement. First we'll tell you this, second and third, but 3 to 5 main points. And I'm gonna give you just 10 minutes to do that, and then present that attention getter. And we're gonna kind of
Do we need
critique.
to be in our groups?
Yeah, 'cause we're not in
Well, I
our,
guess
We're not in
so.
our groups, yeah.
Huh?
we're not in our groups, we're not sitting in our groups right now.
How many, and you said you've got 4 or 5 people? All right, just get in your groups. Get in your groups, come up with an attention getter, a length of topic, and a previous video.
Okay, who yields this
One high school person, one person.
Come over there.
We can talk about this later.
That's my son. He did pre-cal. He did pre-cal.
And we can get started. So you-
My cat would love that.
Your cat would love that?
Well, I had the word to St. Augustine when you said 7 years ago, for that which I'm about to do, my best preparation is simply do for prayer.
There you go. You said link to oh, man.
So, right now,
Retired.
for this,